Ladies and gentlemen, I'm so excited for today's episode of the Rush Hour podcast. We're here in Tennessee speaking to somebody who's running for office here. It's Ailina Carona. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks.
This is so exciting to chat. It's like 80 degrees here.
I know.
Hanging out deep in the suburbs.
Yes.
Now, does this count as Nashville?
It's like the suburbs of Nashville.
Yeah.
I mean, we're like 20 minutes away, so.
So you're running for office. We're going to see your signs popping up. You know, my channel talks a lot about people taking the leap of faith, whether it be creatively, quitting their job, being an entrepreneur, and in your case, running for office.
Yes.
How the heck did this come about?
Well, I'm a mom of 3, and it kind of started when Roe v. Wade was overturned, and I, as a mother of 3 girls and a woman myself, that really ignited it, and I started doing activism work, and then Covenant shooting happened. And when that happened, you know, it being like 20 miles from here, it really hit close to home, and reaching out to our current state representative and her not responding. And then when she did respond, it was with a very disconnected post, and where she was making fun of people asking for sensible gun laws. So when that happened, and then learning she'd been unopposed for most of her elections, and she's been there for over 12 years, I was like, you know what? Why not me?
You know, I looked into like voter turnout in this state because my wife is super big voter. She, you know, we've already voted for you. I should let the audience know. But before I even met, she looks through every candidate and
That's awesome.
I'm talking like hours. Like she's really like she'll go to people's Facebook pages. Who do they? You know, she's really. And I'm kind of like, I'm inspired by that when I see that. And I think when you see states that are deep red or deep blue, you just have this sort of fatalistic approach of like, well, it is what it is, but it's not what it is. So what was that day like where you had the idea, and did you try to talk yourself out of it? Because, you know, you got to be like, come on, don't do this.
Yeah, actually, it was my neighbor. She came up to me, and we were sitting, and she's like, you should run against her. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, I don't know politics. Like, my entire life has been not that. So how would I even do this? And she's like, nobody's running against her. You should do it. And so I was like, let me think about it. And I went inside and I told my husband, I was like, can you believe what she said? Like, he looked at me and he goes, yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Wow.
And I was like, what? He's like, I think you'd be perfect for that. And so that was my, oh, okay. Like, if he knows me best. So if he's saying yes, then yeah, maybe I should think about it. So
and I love that idea where you're like, I don't know anything about politics. That's exactly why people should get into politics.
Absolutely.
Those that aren't, you know, making their career out of it. Yep. I kind of think that's the way the country was supposed to be. Like, all right, I'll go do my time for a couple years.
Yes.
And then you get these senators that, of course, you know, lifelong, make all their money. So you guys are just, you know, how long have you been in Tennessee for?
We have been here for a little bit over 8 years. So we've been here a good amount of time in comparison to a lot of people that just have moved here. And then I think, you know, kind of going back to the voter turnout. So one of the things, especially this election, we've noticed, so in the past, we're one of the lowest voting turnouts in this nation. And then our county specifically is one of the lowest voting turnouts. And it's because there's no candidates. So when you only have one candidate on the ballot, and if you're a Democrat, or even if you're in the middle, you're not going to show up.
What does a Democrat look like in Tennessee? Because I moved here from California. Everyone's like, don't bring your policies here. And I go, first of all, I'm from a small town in Rhode Island. Yeah. My wife's from a small town in Kentucky. Don't tell me where I come from and what I bring to this state.
Right,
but that's the easy thing. And by the way, I was talking to someone from the Wilson County Democrats Instagram page. They're a 7th generation Tennessean.
Yep.
They said they get told to go back to California. It's like, let's argue principle and have these discussions and not just say, don't bring that here.
Right. Well, and Wilson County used to be a Democratic county, and so did Tennessee.
By the way, am I going the right way for this walking trail?
I mean, the walking trail's over there, but
you tell me.
Let's go that way.
Okay.
Sorry, let's go back.
No worries. We got better lighting.
Let's cross the street, and then we'll go that way.
Sweet.
Is that good? Okay.
Yeah. We're doing it live, folks. This is how it works.
But no, so it used to be a blue state. And I think here you're not going to find, there are extremes on both sides. But like right now, the Democratic Party is kind of just like regrouping itself after being pretty non-existent for a while. And so a lot of the Democrats on this end are just wanting choice and the government out of their business, which is ironic considering Republicans like tout themselves on being, no big government. And yet right now they're trying to control a lot. So
and I think that's always good in any state where if everything is led by one party. I even say this in California as
absolutely.
A guy who votes left and progressive. It's nice to have people with different opinions pushing back on that, because in any direction with politics, it can go sort of extreme. But what's interesting now is there's nothing extreme about wanting to keep the government away from your personal choices and gun safety. It's so sad to say that I didn't know what the Covenant shooting was, because there are so many shootings that I just had to look it up while I was waiting at Starbucks.
Yeah.
So that was a big moment. You have 3 kids, 3 children and 3 adults were killed at a private Christian school. I guess now that I've got a 6-month-old, you go, oh my gosh, how do we try to make this country safer?
Absolutely. I mean, my kids were the same ages as the 3 children that were killed in that shooting. And so as a parent, you are immediately, I think for me it was a realization, wow, if it's happening here, and it's a very, like where it happened, it was a very affluent community, very quote unquote safe community. Keep going.
Sorry.
It's okay. Very, quote unquote safe community. And they even did have security guards there, and so it's like it still happened.
Yeah, a guy with a gun, he shot through a glass wall,
through a glass
door. What are you supposed to do?
What are you supposed to do?
Even if you do have a security guard on the other side of the property, you could. I mean, horrible nightmare situations happen.
Exactly, and so having that being like, okay, no matter how much I think my kids are safe at their school, because they do have SROs, which are on campus security guards. Sheriffs. And then, they have all the locks and everything like that. Like, it could still happen there.
Yeah, like the idea that a good guy with a gun stops a bad guy with a gun is just it's like every one of these red states that has open carry laws, and they're still not stopping because these things can happen in seconds.
Yep.
And what can happen with, you could fire 1,000 bullets before someone even knows that it's not fireworks going off.
Exactly, before you even register what's happening. And that was one of the things that happened there. I mean, one of the poor girls there that passed away, she went to go pull the fire alarm to alert everybody, and that's when she was killed. And so it's like, again, if you're spraying bullets, you don't have a chance to run.
Now, what is you think of faith, a lot of people say, hey, thoughts and prayers go out to that community, which, like, it's fine to say that, but with action. Yeah. So what kind of action would you like to take if you were elected in this state here, where obviously there's a lot of rural lands and people have guns to protect their farms and things like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so number one, I totally believe in the Second Amendment. I don't think anybody is trying to take away anyone's guns. However, just like you are responsible for a vehicle that you're driving, and you have to go through registration and license and training, and if you do something illegal with that vehicle, you'll be held responsible, even up until prison if you're drunk driving. So how come we're not having those same laws applied to guns that could potentially actually do more harm?
It's like going to the DMV. You go, all right, every 4 years, or like even passports a little more extended than the DMV. All right, every 5 to 6 years, I got to go get my gun re-registered. I'll show them this, make sure that, they know I got my eyesight still, or whatever you need.
Yeah, you need that. And I mean, right now you have, even with background checks, they're not applied to private sellers. So you can meet with somebody in a parking lot, sell them a gun, and there's no record of that, and you're still totally legal for doing that.
Sure, people pass them down to their family.
And we had a shooting happen here last November with a private seller deal that went bad, and it was in Providence, and a shot went through a Red Robin, and luckily there was nobody sitting in that booth. But I mean, that right there is a prime example of how something could have been avoided.
So your case seems similar to the one I was covering in Clarksville, where the lady running for office, Allie Phillips,
She's a friend of mine.
Yeah, very nice. We had her on Drive with Dave a few weeks ago. She said she initially tried to contact your reps, which is what they'd say, and then they ended up blowing her off and ghosted her after a while. And she was like, I can't believe these guys who don't know a thing about the female body are so uneducated about it, yet you're putting these laws together. So what were you guys trying to get accomplished by contacting your reps before you decided to run for office?
So we had a special session, or Governability called a special session last summer to talk about gun safety, and I'm pretty close with the Covenant moms and working with them as well, and hearing what they're wanting after experiencing such a tragic event in their lives, and hoping that our representatives would at least say, okay, let's talk about a safe storage gun law. Let's talk about red flag laws. Let's talk about, going forward with the private seller background checks. And every single bill that was put on the table for that, some of them were denied even before being fully heard out.
Now, are they just in the pocket of the NRA?
Oh yeah, big time.
Money just gets, causes so many issues because you actually talk about, I think on your Instagram, you say like, let's bring back empathy. Mm-hmm. You got to imagine everyone's trying the best with the information they have.
Yep.
But with that said, there's these biases that exist when there is money involved.
Yeah.
Who's going to ruffle feathers if their campaign's financed and they get a couple of things greased by a giant organization? So how do you battle an organization that big?
Yeah, well, you get Grassroots, and I think that is something. If you look at my opponent, I think she's received like a total of maybe a handful of individual donors. The rest of it is all big PACs like the NRA and different things. Whereas with me, I've received over 800 donations from individual people. And ultimately, money is good, but when you are in the community and you are there listening and hearing the community, that's how you get votes. And I mean, that's what I'm doing.
Now you mentioned this, that you haven't seen your opponent at any of the polling stations. So it's one thing to be funded and be able to plant some signs in the ground. It's another to show like, hey, I'm going to be here doing the work.
That's right.
Is the Tennessee House a full-time job? Like what is it something people just, like, how does that work?
Yeah, so it was built for rich people. It was, so if you get elected, I think you're making around $27,000 a year. Obviously nobody can, you can't support your family off of that. So therefore you can't run. And so unless you go in wealthy, or like myself, I have the privilege of having my husband be the main breadwinner so then I can pursue this, you can't get into it. So now you just have a bunch of people who are wealthy running the government who,
which I can understand. I can understand the idea behind like, hey, we don't want this to be we want a vote of the people and you come together. But obviously
it's worked the other way.
It's worked the other way. Yeah. No, that's so interesting. And I fully, think the whole campaign strategy from the election on the presidential level is absolutely insane. The amount of money that goes into it.
Oh my God.
You've got countries like France where they say, all right, you got 2 weeks, you each get this amount of money, go have at it. And honestly, money in today's world doesn't mean as much anyway because of the power of podcasting and social media.
Yes.
But there is still a ton of misinformation. I mean, the day after every school shooting, the NRA and the gun lobbies make more money by saying, oh, they're going to do this, and then they just sell more guns. And now you've got Kamala Harris saying, I own a gun. And you've got Tim Walz being from a state where, this is pretty gun-friendly.
He hasn't banned them.
Yeah, so I think it's like we at least have to be on the same page with the conversations we're having about the sensibility that's involved. And I think my thought is like, sure, you can respect people that think differently than you, but it feels as though there's a hijacking happening between a very strong segment of the Republican Party. And I think for generations to come, we're going to look back at who really thought the election was stolen, who really sat on their hands when these school shootings were happening. And there's going to be an awakening of what side were you on? Is this really a discussion? And it seems as though in other first world countries, they're as shocked to think that it is a discussion.
I have people, my friend from London, constantly being like, what is happening over there? But and then what I like to see is that right now our government here in Tennessee is ran by the GOP, and they make up a very small percentage of what true Republicans are. And I've seen that since I've been running. I have so many Republicans who are supporting me financially and voting for me, saying that they're tired of the extremism. And so what you see on TV and everywhere, what you hear is this extreme party, when in reality, many Republicans don't feel the same way of that extreme party.
And they're afraid, Nikki Haley, she'll take a
exactly.
shot at Trump in the primaries, and then she bends the knee when it matters. And that's why I look at people I might have no other agreements with, like
Liz Cheney. Love
and go,
her.
all right, well, at least when it's all said and done, so she can at least say, when push came to shove, we're going to choose democracy before we can get into any of these other thoughts. All right, this way?
Yeah.
So I saw this crazy story because, my during the week, my podcast is just like entertainment and pop culture news. And there was a story of someone whose campaign signs were being stolen. So they placed a tracking device on them, popped the trunk of someone's car, and they found like 70 of them. And they're like, this is a felony. These are worth $40 each. Then I come to your Instagram and see that you were finding your signs going missing. What's it like, working, making hard-earned money to find your campaign signs being robbed in the middle of the night?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. Actually, just this week, the one at the four-way stop before you get on the freeway, my sign was there and it was gone. And I was like, it's been there for weeks. And I was like, what the heck? And so later I drove by and it had been completely shredded and torn apart and just like thrown there. And so in that case, I'm like, you're not even stealing my sign, you're just destroying it. And then it's like a statement, and part of me at this point, I don't have a lot of money to spend on more signs. Honestly, I just have to remind myself, a sign is not a vote. If they see my name, it'll maybe trigger something when they go to the ballot, but that doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to change their vote if they see a sign. So I just have to let it go. Otherwise, I'll get real angry.
But it's one of those things that's interesting to talk about, because I think you said those signs were $70
Yes.
signs. So if you're making federal minimum wage at seven and change an hour, you take a few bucks out in taxes, you're talking about 2 days of work to throw one sign up. So when you talk about
3 signs being stolen was a lot of money for us.
Yeah, and you have to, I know for my podcast, when I was getting things off the ground, I'd have to think, do I want to spend 40 bucks on Google ad reads, or, and I would throw it in and it wouldn't lead to one click, and I'm like, God damn it. Yeah. It's hard. It really is. When you're, you're a mom, you got 3 kids and you're trying to make some noise out there. What have you learned from this campaign season? And what do you expect to happen?
Oops, sorry.
No worries.
I think that the biggest thing that I feel like I'm walking away with is, number one, that I can do really hard things and getting over the imposter syndrome. And then number 2, really finding the humanity in people that I disagree with. And I think that's probably the biggest takeaway for me. Like right now we're on the polls, we're on the lines, and there's Trump people in front of us, Trump people behind us, and we're in the middle. And we have become such great friends with these people. We make sure, buy donuts for each other or coffee, and, really just be there for each other. And if there's hecklers, we are like, oh, if there's hecklers on our side, we're like, we're so sorry. And if we get heckled, they come over and they say, we're so sorry. So having that just level of humanity where we're able to still be there for each other despite our differences.
What do you think accounts for more of this sort of, the rise in political anger? Is it the rhetoric of the us versus them? Is it social media? What the heck happened?
Yeah. In all honesty, I do believe prior to 2016, politics were a little bit more tame, and from the rhetoric that has come from the Trump campaign, that's kind of fueled fire on both sides. And so you have, the Democratic or the liberal side super angry because of what is happening to their rights. But then you have the red also being told that their rights are being taken away, so they're super angry at us. So, I feel like it's the perfect storm of just this political unrest, and then it kind of exploded, and now I do believe everybody is starting to get tired of it, though.
I agree. I was in Michigan at a friend's family event. This is a few years back, so it wasn't even like the height of the election season. And I could hear a conversation happening that was a MAGA conversation. And we were like, when it is when you're outnumbered, you're like, I'm not even going here.
Yes.
I've been in this with family. Yes. This isn't happening. But they would have been dumbfounded to ever have heard maybe from another point of view. I think a lot of communities, I'll put it this way, there's a lot that's wrong with the DNC.
Oh, yeah. Trust me, I know.
Including this election, it has pushed my mom away. She ran for office as a Democrat. She's now an independent. There's, a lot of those issues. But, and you can tackle them separately. But I think a lot of people that are conservative, live more in the suburbs, and I think this is proven by the demographics of like Nashville's more blue than the rural
Any
counties.
metro is going to be,
And when you sort of isolate yourself and live more spread out, you don't mix elbows with as many people. I know when I lived in New York City, you were rubbing elbows literally on the subway with everyone, your Latino friends, there's a trans person, there's a gay group over there, you're in different neighborhoods and different pockets, but you all see the humanity in each other because you make eye contact. You politely ask someone to get out of the way or donate to somebody, or you just have those moments of humanity that I think we don't get to see online. So there's so many people, it seems that their only viewpoint of maybe a Democrat or a progressive, whatever you want to label people as, is some crazy like tampon Tim. You know what I mean?
Murder eating or baby eating, like liberal.
Post-birth abortion. These things that it's like, have you engaged with people that are that far off from the reality you see?
Yes, and I think that, especially, again, people are braver online than they are in person. So this last few weeks, I've had people DM me, calling me baby murderer and whatnot. And when I present the facts back to them, they have no response. And so and it's in a respectful way. So it's not me just coming at them being like, oh, you're such an idiot, blah, blah, blah. Like it's in a really non-argumentative, respectful, factual way. And then they have no response. And they're just like, oh, okay, thanks. And like that ends the conversation.
And they might need a minute to
process that.
To look into something. Now, what is your stance on that issue? Obviously, since Roe v. Wade was overturned, it might be the biggest issue of the election
season. It really
is, It has proven to be a losing issue for Republicans in past elections because people say, hey, look, it's one thing to talk about small business, it's another to come into my house and talk about my body. So what's your sort of platform with that?
Yes, yeah. So obviously I'm very, very pro-choice, and I wasn't always that way, but I think it's because I didn't have the correct information. And I think one of the biggest things, really now being in this political arena and learning about women's stories is having an abortion is extremely, extremely personal and difficult thing for any reason. And it is not this idea that women are just looking to kill babies so they get pregnant and have abortions. Like that is such an extreme misinformation of, who women really are. And
the idea that, you're using pregnancy or you're just using abortions as birth control.
Right.
Very rare.
Very, very
Most
rare.
are, through an abortion pill, as soon as you realize
you might possibly be pregnant or, there's so many reasons for a woman to have an abortion. And that being said, that is nobody else's business besides theirs, their doctors and their families. And so having somebody come in being like, number one, you can't have an abortion, and number two, even if you can with exceptions, we have to run it by our lawyers first and make sure that you actually are close to dying before we can perform this procedure on you. And much like Allie Phillips, her story, she had to go out of state. I had a friend who was bleeding in the parking lot, had to get a blood transfusion before they approved her. And so it's so much more dangerous than just saying, oh, you don't want a kid.
Yeah, it's when you actually have the conversation, so many more people end up saying, well, I wouldn't have an abortion, but you can do what you want, but I'm pro-life. And you have to explain that's not what it is. So it's almost like a communications issue where people want to almost virtue signal where they stand. And I think Kamala's actually done a good job of saying, no one's telling you what to do.
Yes.
We're just saying actively stop telling other people how to make difficult decisions in life.
If you don't like it, don't get one.
Yeah, and you watch these videos of people that they put on a doctor's outfit and stand outside an abortion clinic, and they're they have a PhD from DeVry University, and you're like, what are you even doing? You're shaming people on the hardest day of their life, and when you talk about bringing humanity back, it's about having these difficult conversations. Now, did you debate your opponent? Because we should all be able to live by our record. So what happened there?
So she won't debate. Many of the Republicans that are incumbents, won't debate. As you can see with Marsha Blackburn, she won't debate Gloria Johnson. I mean, for whatever reason, I honestly believe that my opponent thinks that she's been cush in her job for so long that she doesn't need to give me any time. Or maybe she just finally wants to retire after 12 years and isn't trying very hard.
Whenever you put your time and energy into something, there can always come a bitterness from it.
Yeah.
And if she's just a wealthy woman who probably doesn't even, cashes these checks, they go right into her retirement accounts or whatever, it might not be as big of, by all means, she should be held accountable. Like, it should be almost required. Sit down in front of each other and just talk it out.
Yep.
Look at your record. What does that speak for? And can you speak at all to Marsha Blackburn? Because I'm new to Tennessee.
Yeah.
I don't know much about her other than she tried to get in a little beef with Taylor Swift. I think last election. And I think she learned her lesson and be like, no, we love Taylor. Taylor's fine. But, they're talk about cowardly, not wanting to stand by their convictions.
Oh, yeah. Well, Marsha's kind of, I don't know. She's crazy. She's the one that's same thing. I feel like she's an even worse version of my opponent, but just very funded by money, or all of the decisions are made for by money. Very extreme politics of wanting control body and books and just everything. I feel that is wrong. And she just doesn't want to be held accountable. There's financial issues there. Yeah, it's a mess. And again, she's been in office for a long time, and we need a change.
Now, I don't know if you still have where's your faith at, and how does your political ideologies work with going to church, if you do?
Yeah, so I was raised evangelical Christian, and I was a speaking pastor and worship leader for most of my life up until we moved out here to Tennessee. And I have the values. When we moved here, it was 2016, and we moved here a week before Election Day. And seeing how we responded to that election, and being Hispanic myself, and the rhetoric that Donald Trump had around the Hispanic community, it really started pushing me away. And I no longer would call myself a Christian, but I still hold true to the values of, looking out for the poor and welcoming the immigrants, and living a life of love and kindness and empathy, and doing everything that we can to bring unity. And so because of those core values, I do feel like that is something that is missing in a lot of the evangelical Trump era Christians.
When you say Trump era, because it probably has changed a lot. When I was looking to move to Tennessee, we moved here because we were having a baby, and we wanted the suburban world that we thought would be a good sort of place for our baby to grow, and who knows if we'll stay here. But I was raised Catholic, and I probably hadn't gone to church in 3 or 4 years, because I'd only go when I was it was a big deal for my mom, It's and it was my the celebration of my grandmother's, what would have been her 90th birthday. She passed when she was 52, so she passed in the late 1980s when I was only a year old, so I never got to meet her. But we went back to town to Rhode Island a few weeks ago, and we went, for my mom to show support. The whole family went, and it was fine. It was okay. But after the mass, I ran into someone who listens to my podcast, and she was like, "What are you doing at church?" And I was like, "I'm not a bad guy. I'm a spiritual guy, probably more than a lot of people that go to church. I just think that God is connected to everybody.
Yes.
And that's that vicarious love that we feel when we see a dad hug his daughter and surprise her. When we see these stupid videos online, we feel this love because we're all connected. And the church, when it's operating in bad faith, places God way up in the clouds as a do as I say without questioning. So when I bring back the hypocrisy to people that might be, losing thought of what Jesus would have wanted, I go, wouldn't he have wanted to flip the tables at these people selling $100,000 watches in his name, Bibles from China and all these things? This would have been a no-brainer 10 years ago. And yet, what you do is you see these interviews of people saying, I don't care if we lose democracy, that's my guy. Yeah. And that's a wild place to be.
It is. We had recently, there was somebody that we know, and my husband was having a conversation with them, and this person was a woman, and my husband said, aren't you worried about losing your rights? And she said, you could take all of my rights, voting, personal, everything, as long as you make the economy great again.
which is like late stage capitalism, because why don't we just flood the rivers with toxins and just, like, where are the regulations to bring us a world that's going to be good for our kids?
When she said that, I was like, what?
And by the way, that's where I do understand J.D. Vance when he was saying people with kids have a stake. I just think it was the wrong take, but yes. I understand what he was trying to say. It was a dumb thing to say,
right?
But he was trying to say, no, look, there's an investment here. But that would claim that if you don't have kids, there is no investment.
Right, exactly.
I think we all want to live in a beautiful world
where we have our bodily autonomy and
the economy's rip roaring.
Yes,
and all those
exactly.
things. And of course, like the last few years were wildly challenged by this global pandemic, because I think it brought a false sense as to who was right, who was wrong.
Yep.
And a lot of people are saying, hey, the world's, a lot of other countries would be envious of how we handled inflation, and that's just like a fact. But that global look on the country is probably less important to people that are voting for you. So what's your sort of final thought on anyone who might be listening that might be Republican and yet is going, you know what, I'm going to vote for this younger, youthful energy here? Yeah,
so I think for our community specifically, the main thing that I keep hearing from the constituents is that, number one, they don't feel represented. They don't have anybody that they feel they could call and talk to, and that they would respond with a sincere response. Lots of it is copy-paste. And then number two, putting our family and community first is such a priority. Right now, our public education is at risk.
47th in the country, I just read.
Yes, it is.
Tennessee.
Yep, for funding. Yeah. It's
how do you even have a chance if you're, if you don't have the money to attract?
Right. Yeah.
You talk about economics, right? Like if you aren't spending the money to attract great teachers, how are you going to inspire people to be the next generation?
And it's too long to get into it on this podcast, but trust me, I got all the details on that. But I think like right now, my opponent, she sponsored the book banning bill through all of the state of Tennessee. And so you have over 1,100 books that have been banned, and everything ranging from Pinkalicious, which is a toddler book, to My Perfect Mexican Daughter, which is about Hispanic immigration and assimilation, which is so important. And so you have all these differing books that have been pulled completely. And so that actually has won me the teacher vote, even if they are Republican. And they have messaged me saying, I can't work under these conditions. And even my daughter, there was an app that was pulled that offered 40,000 plus books to elementary school children with like interactive games and stuff, and that got banned. And so one of my daughter's friends during class yesterday stood up and said, everybody needs to vote for Kyrie's mom because then we can get Epic back.
You would not think that these are the issues you would have to cover.
Right. I'm like, how is that? This child wants, first of all, what fourth grader is thinking about the elections?
I know. I saw that they banned a book by an author I think this was in Florida, their author's last name was Gay. So what they had done was they had just searched gay in one place. And the person's like, hey, what are you doing? I wrote a book about science.
Yeah, it's like about trees. Calm down.
I had my notes here because I didn't want to miss anything. Yep. I wanted to ask you about voucher scams. I don't know one thing about this. I hear people talking about this. The hell's a voucher scam? Yeah,
so vouchers are basically a grant funding program from the state to give to children to go to private schools or charter schools. It sounds really, and it's called Parents' Choice, so a parent can choose what schools they go to. Sounds really good surface level if you don't look into it, but ultimately it ends up taking away funding from public education. And the people that can afford these vouchers, they will offer you $7,500 a year for whatever school you're choosing. In Wilson County specifically, and we are one of the lower priced private schools, it's $13,000 a year.
So it's a way to buy yourself out of the public school and get...
Yes, but only people that can actually afford the other half of it, which isn't, we have 3 kids. We couldn't afford that for each kid. So you're still basically giving money to the wealthy.
I'm a big public school kid. My sister and I are Irish twins, which means we were born less than a year apart. We went to the same high school, the same college, in the same Greek system, but the only difference was she went to a Christian school, Catholic school for 6th grade, and I went to a public school. And I couldn't help but thinking, like, Christian schools, you don't even need a teacher's degree.
No, you don't.
Like, what are we doing?
Yeah,
you know?
They're not held to the same standardized testing that public schools are. It's actually a proven fact that if children go to private school, they'll actually learn less than a public education. So again, it's just for the wealthy. And there are PACs that are funding our governor and certain. Yeah, start promoting a podcast. Sorry, that's my husband.
Oh, hello. How are you?
I'll be right inside.
Good-looking guy you got right there.
Yeah, I do.
Wow. Oh boy, no wonder.
Yeah, I'm kind of obsessed with him. But yeah, so it's just the funding for the wealthy. And our governors, our representatives are being funded by American First corporations to push this through.
Yeah, so we got to wrap up, but it's Corona 4, hold on, I want to make it right.
Yeah.
Corona 4 TN57, that's the district you're running in.
And it's spelled Carona.
Yeah, not like the beer. And by the way, I just had you on so that we could become friends with you and your a very attractive husband.
Yeah.
We live so close, so you're going to have to come over and barbecue with us.
Yes, we'll have to do something. We have a big old backyard, so.
And if anyone wants to support, do you still have are you still accepting donations?
Absolutely.
All right, so we'll post a link to that if you're out of state and you just want to support. The best way you can do that is to share the podcast, to donate to the campaign, give her a follow on social media, and we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much for having me.